One of my very favorite flowers are geraniums. I love having them in my yard. I love having geranium paintings hanging in my home. They just make my heart jump with delight. In this video, I'm going to show you 5 things that I do to make sure that my geranium paintings are expressive and lively. Stay tuned. So there are 5 things that I like to keep in mind when I'm painting geraniums. And the first is, once I've decided on a color, I like to pre-mix my colors. And by that I mean I'll pick a main color and I'll do a string of different values where I'm just adding a little more white and a little more white. I do this with a palette knife. And if you'll notice, I didn't mix this where it's completely mixed. It's still kind of marbleized. A lot of times I'll have geraniums where I'll also mix in a little yellow to give a sense of some sunlight on it. But I thought this for our exercise would give us enough values to give you a feel. The second thing that I would do is to draw in our shapes. I'm just going to use a little round brush for that. Geraniums are not perfect circles. Some of them are oval, some of them are a little flatter at the bottom. So I think it helps beforehand, before you start just setting into it, to kind of get a feel for where things are going to be. Keep in mind they tend to be on pretty tall stems, so we want to leave some room for some leaves at the bottom. So I'm just kind of loosely going to get some shapes in here. I tinted this canvas with some Payne's Gray just to give us a nice background. So there we've got 3 big heads. The next thing I would suggest, the brush that you use makes a big difference. This is a Rosemary & Company Classic Long Flat size 4. I love these brushes. They have a very soft edge to them. It's not a chiseled sharp edge at all. It'll give you really soft edges. It just leaves a beautiful stroke. An artist said this years ago. I wish I knew who it was. I'd give her credit for it. But she was talking about how important the outside edges are when you're looking at a flower, that it's really the outside edge that defines what that flower is. So as we put in these colors, I want to be very mindful of the outside edges. I am loading my brush with paint. I don't want to get the paint down the ferrule, but I've got a lot of paint at the tip. I'm going to be putting some big strokes in. I'm going to be turning that brush as I go, and as I move to the outside, I want to be very mindful that I'm going to have some places that are going to jut out farther than other places. We're not going to paint this in a ball. I'm going to be mindful where my light source is, because the bottom of the geranium is going to be much darker. This isn't rocket science. Don't worry about getting little bitty dabby strokes. It'll be a lot prettier and looser looking if you'll use some big expressive strokes. Put a stroke down one time and leave it alone. So I've got my darker value here, my middle value here. I'm not even going to clean my brush. I'm going to move up into this next value. I'm going to get lots of paint on there. And I'm just going to begin putting in. So you won't do a solid section one color, a solid section another, and then move to another. There'll be places where they'll overlap a little bit, and that keeps it more interesting. But just really be sure to keep a lot of paint on your brush at this stage. Try to hit it once and leave it alone. You can go in and put a little darker value in a spot or two. Then go in with something much lighter right near it. Can be nice. Again, just figure out where that light source is coming from. All right, let's do one. This one's got a little more of an oval shape to it. This paint that I'm using is old and it's wanting to drag a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of water on my brush, see if I can just kind of loosen that up. I'm being very mindful of this outside edge. I want to keep that edge interesting. I want to have some real ins and outs to it. It's good to vary, like I say, every once in a while, drop another value into a spot. Here you've got some big dips here. Just turning that brush, turning that brush. If you don't get enough values and if you don't get your darks dark enough and your lights light enough, it won't have any form to it. Now I'm going to go back in some of these dark places. I'm just dropping a little bit of extra color here and there. That's looking a little wonky. I'm just going to see if I can kind of flatten this area out. And here we have one that's much smaller. This is one that's just opening. And this is a place where it's good to also use the corner of the side of your brush. So we don't want every stroke being flat. We want to turn it so that you also have some that are just hitting that corner. So when you have more of a bud, they're not going to be quite as varied. They're going to, I'm going to drop back to this. And here that was a stroke with just the corner of my brush. Let's do that again up here. Let's just drop a little corner in here and there. Just keep moving that brush around. Get some pretty strokes. Sometimes it helps me to go ahead and put the stem in, and it helps you keep in mind how that head is facing. So I don't like how round this has become, so I'm going to intentionally elongate this a little bit so I can get a little bit better shape going. Same thing up here. I might elongate that one just a little bit more. I'm going to go back into this last value, which is almost pure white. And I'm just going to hit a couple of more places just with some short. Hit a couple of just edges here and there. Paint's getting pretty thick by now, which is fine. You might need to go back in and drop a little dark in if it gets to all the same value. I'm going to drop in the stems. I'm going to use an angled brush with a real sharp edge, and I'm going to use some chromium oxide green. In our next video, we'll put in the leaves, but I thought it would help make these make a little more sense if there are some stems. I love using an angled brush for something like this. It just makes it So much easier. It's nice when things can cross other things, so everything doesn't look flat. Some things go behind other things. And we'll fill in with some leaves. Okay? Oh, let me mention this too. And this is something we can do. I love putting in the little buds that hang below. And there are some different ways you can do that. One is just to, I've got a fair amount of paint out of a couple of these values. I dipped a little bit in here and a little bit in here. And I'm just going to, I want this kind of loose and impressionistic, so I'm just going to put a blob there. And another blob. And another blob. And then when we do our leaves, we can go in and add a little green to that as well. Try to vary those in size, and they don't all hang level. They should be hanging at different angles. Vary the color a little bit. They need to be size appropriate, so a smaller flower is not going to have as large a buds. All right. So that gives you an idea how to quickly do a geranium. I think it really helps to pre-mix your colors in this situation. Draw those shapes in first and vary the shapes. Use the right brush. I love these soft flat brushes from Rosemary and Company. Be real mindful of these outside edges to keep an interesting shape, and just again make sure you've got your darks dark enough and your lights light enough to get some good form. I'm going to link the next video where we'll put in some interesting leaves. Hey, if you've enjoyed this video, would you consider hitting like and subscribe? Thank you. I'm going to put a link in the description box below for part 2, where I'll show you how to put in the leaves for these geraniums. Hey, I'd invite you to go to my website, victoriahagemanart.com, where you'll see all kinds of tutorials and full-length courses. And of course, with my YouTube channel, there's all kinds of free stuff coming out all the time. Thanks a lot for watching. God bless.